Jake!
Andrew,
What's up, man?
what's going on?
Oh, it's another fucking Thursday. I have tomorrow off, though, so...
Any particular reason why you have tomorrow off?
Well, mostly because 2021 has been a complete fucking shit show, but... that doesn't affect me here in Utah as much.
Are you talking about the
Speaking...
the geopolitical events taking place?
Oh, absolutely. Between our own country, I guess really nothing's really... Well, aside from, China imprisoning 3 million Muslims, it's somewhat normal.
It is. Well, I mean, I hate to use the word normal, but that has been going on for a while.
How long has that been going on now? 3 or 4 years?
I mean, I've been hearing about it for 3 or 4 years, it seems like, so I don't know how long it's actually been going on, but it's still crickets from the mainstream media about it.
Yeah, I found that part kind of disturbing. Like, why wouldn't anybody want to go ahead and report on that a little bit more than they should? Even Vice, I haven't really seen anything from Vice, and they're kind of, I thought was a really, really good place to see stories like that.
Trump,
or maybe I'm just not looking hard enough.
Trump took it upon himself to make China kind of his enemy for his presidency, and it seems like the elite and the media and the anti-Trump people have really taken offense to any criticism of China whatsoever because they are the enemy of Trump, it seems like. So it's really, really interesting. Even watching them just shield China from any blame regarding COVID outbreak and how they completely blew it trying to contain it in the early days.
Well, I think what's the most interesting is what's the difference between a democracy, or excuse me, a republic trying to contain a pandemic and a communist dictatorship trying to contain a pandemic, right? It's like nobody really knows what the fuck's going on in a republic, and then they're like, okay, we should probably figure out something now. But in a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship, it's like, well, let's go ahead and keep this under the rug. And then when somebody finds out, fuck, we should make sure that nobody comes in and out of a region, out of a city, out of their home. Yeah, I don't know. Which type of government is correct?
Well, I
don't know.
So
hey, cool cat.
I was watching this unfold in like late December or early January 2019, right? Late December 2019, early January 2020. And I think China was definitely going after some of the Hong Kong protesters. There were videos coming out of people just passing out in the streets, armed military people in carrying fully automatic weapons and hazmat suits, just going up and kidnapping people out of their cars. These were videos that were getting smuggled out of China early on and getting posted to Twitter. They were locking people in buildings. They were lighting buildings on fire with people in them. It was really strange, and it seemed like they were definitely taking advantage of the situation, not to contain the outbreak, but to go after Hong Kong protesters. So there's your answer right there. Is they're not even gonna address it. They're gonna take care of any dissent.
Well, it's funny you say that. One of my professors at the journalism school I went to was a professor from, it wasn't Wuhan, but it was some city in China. I think it was Shanghai. And he talked about how, in the United States, journalists and even PR folk, they're not paid so much, especially as a beginner, right? However, in that type of government, he's like, you are paid a lot. Also, there is this kind of informal, kind of almost like a bribe type system that's like it's there but it's not, and he felt a little uncomfortable kind of talking about it, but he definitely made it show like, hey, you want to be in media, in a kind of state controlled media, because you're going to get paid quite a bit. And I was like, well, I'm not moving to China anytime soon, but I appreciate the advice. But I just found that really interesting. Right? It's like you have state-controlled media where individuals like that get paid a lot versus Huffington Post, CNN, ABC.
I mean, there's there's room to argue how much the state does control that. I mean, I've seen people argue that they are the ones who control the state. The media is the one who, like, the elite who control the media are the ones who are actually pushing the narrative with regard to how the government proceeds with policy. And I think Michael Malice has talked a lot about this. And it's certainly intriguing to think about, but I don't know if I totally subscribe to that. Certainly, factions of it are aligned with the same people, and certainly people who secretly run the world, I think, are running the media and the narrative created by the press.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is, the quote-unquote insurrection, or the, storming the Capitol building.
Storming. So,
what do you think about that? What was your perspective?
I had a friend who was there live streaming on Facebook, and I noticed immediately the complete lack of security. I was watching him as they got through the first barriers, and there was just no cops around. They got through the second barriers, and there was a cop here and a cop here just kind of standing around doing nothing. And then his feeds kept cutting out. So that was the last I saw. They had gotten through the last barrier before getting to the steps of the Capitol. And and I was thinking, holy shit! It looks like they might run up into the building here. Certainly, they're not going to let them. But I've seen the videos that have come out of the cops kind of taking the barriers down and just guiding these protesters up to the Capitol and just basically letting them in.
That is crazy.
Have you seen these videos?
I haven't seen those videos where they're like, hey, come on up.
If you watch the footage, right, the footage from inside, these people are dogs who caught a car and they just don't know what to do, and they're just like having the time of their lives in there. Like they weren't armed, they weren't attempting to do anything really. It's completely ridiculous to say there was an insurrection. That I mean, there's so much conflicting footage that goes against the narrative that completely dismantles it, right? It doesn't just go against it. It completely dismantles the mainstream narrative on what happened. And at this point, people are choosing to go along with the mainstream narrative because they're comfortable doing it. It doesn't challenge their worldview. They're comfortable just staying there, having this information presented to them, where they can so easily go and fact check and see through video, not some person giving an opinion, but through video of people who were there, what exactly happened that day. There was no attempt to take over the government, none whatsoever.
Yeah, they just wanted to go ahead and jump right in.
I did see a video of a unarmed woman getting shot in the head and killed by a cop or Secret Service. I heard they were protecting Mike Pence. I don't know, but she was unarmed and she was not a threat. There were cops behind her. Horrible.
They blasted her in the head.
I think it might have been I think it might have been the neck. Right. It was a horrific video to watch.
Somewhere in here.
Yeah, and she died instantly, as far as I can tell. She definitely died. I don't know if it was instantly, but there was no outrage about it. She did not deserve to die. She did not need to die.
Yeah, she was a veteran too, wasn't she? That's what I thought.
I don't know. It's possible. I think there were 4 deaths that day.
4? Holy shit! I didn't know there was 3 more after that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were 4.
Well, I think one of the things is you always kind of follow the money, especially with that. ABC is owned by Disney, right? Disney is a company out of California, right? And then you have CBS, which is owned by Viacom, which again, I believe that's another California or New York company. I mean, I don't know. If there was some sort of insurrection, right? That was a really shitty insurrection. Nobody had guns. You didn't have any major generals on your side. And, Trump, he really was kind of like, I mean, he's a prep guy, he's a PR guy, he's a very big business guy. It's more of a, look, I'm not going away. I didn't lose, but I'll go ahead and kind of spin that I didn't lose, right? And, as he was kind of spinning up the crowd, I mean, that's what he does. That's what he's always done. But he's not, he's not going to go ahead and start a civil war. I mean, God, how fucking shitty would it be if we started a civil war over this? Our last civil war was about literally owning people. You know, kind of a thing that multiple people for centuries were talking about before then that was wrong, right? Now it's just like, you know, we're upset about the pandemic, you know, being two different parties. I don't know. It'd just be a real shitty way to have, you know, start a civil war.
Well, there's video of him saying like, continue protesting and be peaceful. Don't. I don't remember what his exact phrase was, but he told the protesters to be peaceful and remain peaceful, not to destroy things. And even that, if you look at the destruction of property that happened at the Capitol, it wasn't a lot. Like maybe a broken window, and for how many people actually got inside and were there, how little damage was done is pretty impressive. And that's another thing they're not talking about. And Trump, there's legitimate reasons, like after the last year we've had, to be very angry and disheartened, but certainly not trust the results of the election. I don't know if you've been following all the, I'll call it evidence that the election was rigged. I believe all the elections are rigged. I don't believe presidents are elected. I believe they're selected. But it's clearly obvious there's some shady shit to me. You know, there's the videos of the ballots getting brought out from under the table after the poll watchers were sent home that night during the busted pipe that was just a leaking toilet.
Yeah, I remember
that video has not been explained. There's the videos of all the poll watchers who were Republican who were not allowed to come in and observe. There's all these statistical discrepancies with regard to how many people only voted for president and then didn't vote for any other office on the ballot or any other ballot initiative, which is historically unprecedented on the local, state, and federal level. How many people did that in all these different locations? So it's really for them to come in and say that there's first of all, they said no evidence of election fraud. Then it was no evidence of widespread election fraud. Then no evidence of widespread election fraud that changed the outcome of the election. So they kept moving the goalpost. And if you think about how many votes Trump lost by in some of these states, like 10,000, 15, 20,000, it would not be that hard to flip the outcome of the election with just tens of thousands of votes changed that way in just a few different counties. And to think that the people who are responsible for overseeing this, that they don't have some kind of bias or political agenda after this year and where people are at. I mean, people are seriously emotionally distraught. I mean, certainly with regard to anti-Trump people. And to say that this isn't worth looking into, these discrepancies, these issues, is completely ridiculous. And if they had any interest in uniting the country after an unprecedented election where they pretty much took ballots and just shipped them out widespread to anyone and everyone, to not investigate it thoroughly and kind of calm people down a little bit, it's completely unacceptable if they really wanted unity. But I don't think they want unity. I think they want us all divided to have people mistrust the election and the results of the election and to keep us fired up and hating each other. And I think that was the goal.
Yeah, well, it worked. I mean, I think the thing that I always remember is when, and this is what bothers me because, you know, the lesser of two evils or just evils, right, is you have, when Trump was elected, and I was in this boat, right, I did not want to see more dynasties. The founding fathers didn't like dynasties, obviously, right? They, created a new country because they were sick of, monarchy, right? And political dynasties always have kind of bothered me. The Bushes, the Clintons, and this was a huge political dynasty, I felt like, with the Clintons, right, in the last election. And, it was nice to have somebody that was a populist. And then, he acted like a populist, right? He really catered to the people. He played politics a little bit, but he wasn't the best at it, that's for sure. And he didn't play the game as well as everybody else. I mean, he definitely didn't play like Obama did. I mean, Obama was over here, telling Stone to go fuck off to Russia. Meanwhile, we think we have a free press. No. But even then, what really bummed me out at the very last day, I was hoping for it. I was crossing my fingers. I was hoping Two things. One, he was going to pardon Joe Exotic, of course, right? And then he was going to pardon Snowden. And neither of those two things happened.
Well, I was hoping for
Really?
also Assange and Ross Ulbricht.
Does Assange have crimes, federal crimes here in the United States?
Yeah, I believe they're whatever, like, whistleblower related thing. I don't know what specifically they are, but there were crimes he could have pardoned him for.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. The whistleblower stuff. I mean, that's why I didn't want to follow through with my journalism degree. I kind of figured out, like with WikiLeaks and with Snowden, it's like you're going to get punished for this shit. And quite frankly, I just wanted to follow really extremely interesting journalism like that and whistleblow. But if I did that, I'd have to either stay in an Argentinian embassy and then write shit all over the walls, or I can live in Russia for the rest of my life. Russia! Out of all the places in the world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like he chose that, though. He got stuck there.
What's that?
It's not like he chose Russia. He got stuck there, actually. He just had a had a layover in Russia trying to get to the country that was accepting his asylum. And while he was there laid over, the country they withdrew the asylum request they had initially granted because the United States was putting pressure. I don't remember for the life of me what country it was. It was in South or Central America. So he had a layover in Russia, so he ended up getting stuck there, and that's why he's in Russia.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's because the media doesn't want you to know that. They want you to use the evil Russians are plotting against the U.S. with evil Edward Snowden, who's putting American secrets out there and putting us all in danger.
Oh, yeah, and that's not to say that Russia has their own secrets. They definitely do. But, okay, if we were to form a more perfect government, right? If they said, okay, Jake, here's the keys. You are now imperator of the United States. Kind of like the old, in the Roman culture, right? If shit really hit the fan, you would become like a dictator for a certain amount of time, right? In order to lead the army and defeat the enemy or whatever it might be, right? Cincinnatus, right? The city's named after him, Cincinnati. What would you do? How would you reform the government today if we were to give you the keys?
After this year, I've gone full ANCAP, right? So my goal would be to eliminate everything. Strategically, I would start with... you would have to, first things first, do something about the currency crisis and the debt crisis, right? Like, that's not going to get paid back. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to let the dollar collapse and combine something with crypto and gold to create a stable currency, right? And the Federal Reserve immediately. They have not to have any centralized control over the currency and taxes and all regulations with regards to small businesses, certainly first. I'd like to see them all gone, but certainly start with small businesses, including employment regulations like minimum wages and things like that. Ending Social Security. I would make sure that people who've paid in their entire lives and are over a certain age continue to still receive benefits. I feel like that's fair. But I mean, they put up with it, so maybe it isn't fair. Fuck them. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I would like to if they've been paying into it, make sure they're covered. But people under 40 or whatever the age might be, like stop stealing their money. It's a Ponzi scheme, literally. There's no argument against it not being a Ponzi scheme. So I would start there, eliminating those types of things. Allow the economy to be open and freer. I would eliminate the FDA. Make sure everyone who's got any kind of medical condition, serious and debilitating, has access to any and all treatments available in this country and abroad, whether they're experimental or not. I would completely eliminate the FDA, completely eliminate the DEA, stop arresting people for victimless criminal offenses, drugs, or anything else. Where would I go from there?
So we're really turning the keys over.
Oh, yeah.
We're restructuring everything.
Yeah, so, and then the last thing I would touch for sure is any kind of safety net, like disability stuff or food assistance, things like that. But again, like I would immediately start with not stealing poor people's money from their paychecks, and that includes taxes and Social Security withholdings, FICA taxes. I would end corporate taxes. Again, though, there would have to be some kind of, because if we just did that, the entire world economy would collapse because our debt would just all be defaulted. But I mean, I think every currency is on the verge of collapse throughout the world, so I think it would be kind of a great purge of all the fiats throughout the world, and something newer and better would come along through it. But I think that's where I would certainly, those things, right? Anything that impairs someone's ability to live their life free and steals their money or things along those lines, things that interfere in people's lives and basically things that interfere in people's lives.
Would you split up any? Would you go fairly? Would you leave the union as it is today, or should there be some sort of segmentation? Or
if we're talking realistically, like some realistic expectation going forward, I think that there needs to be some kind of dissolution of this union. There's no reason that this should be one country. We don't agree on virtually anything, and these ideas that like, hey, I worship the government and they should be in charge of all these aspects of our lives, and I think that will be best for everyone. Hey, you go over there and try that in California or whatever district you want to do that in, and these states over here can do a more free market approach or certainly less government approach. And the way it should be is all 50 states get to do what they want, how they want, with very little, if any, centralized authority. There's an argument to be made that there should be a standing army to protect the 50 states that's centralized through the United States government. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I see the argument made for that, and it probably would stay that way. But with regards to break them up into 50 smaller countries, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely most of those states would contribute to the top 10 GDP producers, right? California being the biggest out of all the states, GDP-wise. And then I think Texas is number 2 as far as states, and then New York is number 3, which is interesting. One of the things I've always kind of feared within the union is if you hike up corporate taxes enough and you do however much bullshit you want to do, you're going to have individuals like Elon Musk, right? You're going to have, or other individuals. I can't remember the individual that owns or operates Oracle, right? Those two companies moved from California to Texas recently. I think that's one of the biggest that's kind of the thing that scares me the most, is the brain drain, and being able to say, this particular company went ahead and started in a completely different country, right? I think we saw that with Spotify. Spotify was started in Sweden, and they're fairly big now. Yeah, so that's a very scary thing for me, just because once that starts to happen, you're going to definitely see, I don't know, just kind of the economic superpower that we are will start to shift to other countries, right? And it's going to be kind of like these really innovative companies like Google or like Facebook, right, that make just gobs of money, but also they're innovative, so they're sustainable, at least for a time, a decade, right? When did you tell me to join Facebook? 2010. 2009, you told me to join Facebook. And also, I didn't know if you knew that. You were the one that told me to join Facebook.
Oh, did I?
After MySpace. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'll get out of MySpace and go to Facebook. But that's the thing that kind of scares me the most, is when you have these large, very large kind of corporate businesses move out of the United States. Now,
so wait, so you're worried about if the corporate tax rate was to go up, then they would leave?
Yes.
Okay.
Or not even that. Like these large companies, ADP, Oracle, okay, fine, Tesla. But what about the guys that are kind of starting new? What about the 22-year-olds, the Steve Jobses of the world, and they're like, man, I went to school here, but I don't fucking live here. This sucks. I want to start my business in Japan, India. I hope it's not Argentina, right? Brazil.
I think,
and then you have them sucking up and creating the tax-paying dollars there.
I think they would likely
jobs.
go wherever the best economic incentives are, and if you've got a state with very little to any income taxes, but with corporate and personal, very little regulations, very little labor laws, I think that would likely be more to draw someone in, unless they have kind of transcended that small business and startup into a more bigger corporation, and they've got the resources to move it to a place where they don't have to really care about the economic incentives, and they can just go wherever they think is nice. But I think 99 times out of 100, you will find corporations, businesses are going to go wherever is economically makes the most sense for their business.
Yeah, right. And the thing, at least, working at a large company myself, tech company too, is we do have employees across the entire planet, right? And we have like 1,000 in India. We have another 1,000 in Romania. But what's fascinating to me is the headquarters is here. It's really where the employees are. If you think to yourself, are these people, are they reliable? Are they good? And, are they going to generate me money? That's ultimately where you're going to want to start your business, I think, as a business owner, right? Because if you want to scale it and make it big, you think of those three things. Reliable, is this, are they good, and are they going to go ahead and make me money in the long term? And if that starts to happen and you start to see just regular folk like me and you being like, fuck this, I'll just move to another country, those companies are going to start thinking the same thing. And those entrepreneurs are going to start thinking the same thing. And I know this doesn't really apply to what I asked you, but I think that's my biggest fear in this country. So, I actually kind of agree with you on the corporate tax part. And, even the regulation part of it. One thing that is kind of scary to me is the Earth kind of turning into a greenhouse. And I've only just had this recently. Most of my life, I always thought of it like a pragmatist, right? This is going to happen, so I need to just do this. I'm not going to bitch about it. I'm not going to be a bitch about it. I'm just going to roll with what happens, right? So I was telling Alyssa, my wife, let's go ahead and buy some land in Alaska, because I'd imagine in 80 years, if the climate does eventually change and become more of a greenhouse rather than more of a cold, climate, you're going to want to have some land in Alaska. It's just like, it's fucking bonkers I'm thinking like that. But, I think at the end of the day, you just kind of have to roll it out and just kind of go with what you've been dealt and what needs to happen rather than bitch about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, with regard to climate change, right, I think the Earth will kill us off long before it lets us destroy the Earth. And I really believe the Earth is a living being that has its own defense mechanisms, and it'll destroy us before it lets us destroy itself. And
speaking of which, I was looking at, Elon, going ahead and colonizing Mars, and I saw one of the biggest hurdles in colonizing Mars. Mars doesn't have an electromagnetic field, so all that radiation from the sun will just, fuck you up. And being able to kind of generate that, or, go ahead and colonize one of the moons on either Saturn or Jupiter, because their electromagnetic field is so large that it just extends to where the moons orbit. And I was just like, holy shit, how the fuck are we going to solve that problem on Mars?
well, there's no doubt, right? Like, technology can and will solve that at some point. Like, it can and it will. And there's no doubt that at some point, technology, if it continues to advance, will get us as a species, as a whole species, off of this planet, colonizing other planets, solar systems. Who knows what else is out there? But that's the same thing with regards to protecting the Earth. Technology is advancing at such a rate. Is there any doubt that in 100 years we will have some kind of invention if we continue to progress?
True.
We're going to eliminate carbon emissions and things like that. Those will be gone.
I agree with that.
The
too.
only thing
There's
the only thing that could get away is government regulation and putting restrictions in place to allow innovation and newer, better alternatives to come along, which is what we're seeing now. The only reason oil is still dominating is because the government wants it to be, because it's getting a lot of people rich. But why so much of the craziness is going on in the world is because we're kind of transcending oil right now. It's only a matter of time before it's the dominant fuel source for vehicles and whatever else.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I hate the kind of the Luddite kind of like we're always going to have this particular technology or be in this rut for this long. Like no, we're not. I mean, I think the necessity of invention comes from necessity, right? So being able to have a group of people, and we're going to have a whole grip of them here, a couple more billion people on the planet that'll go ahead and figure this out. I think the argument that I've always kind of struggled with regulation, and I do agree with you on deregulating most things, pretty much all things. When people say, let's go ahead and kind of live in this kind of climate accords, you have, the France, UK, the United States now, right? And other countries kind of saying this, but then you have these developing countries, not just South America, right? But also, sub-Saharan Africa, right? These are real developing countries, and we're going to come in and say, no, you can't do that. You can't use oil. Don't do that. Get some solar panels up. You'll figure it out. And these fucking subsistence farmers were like, who the fuck are these people? Like, we're just trying to make a better life for ourselves. I always find that to be, what did we learn a long time ago? The white man's burden, right? I feel like that is the ultimate white man's burden, is to go to Africa, where we're going to have the largest boom of population here in the next 100 years, and say, no, you can't do what we did. What we did was fucked up. You got to do it this way. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're not going to help you, but the Chinese will. That's the part that really gets me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I hate to use this term, but there are very few things that are more of privilege than white liberals who advocate policies to combat climate change.
Oh, well, especially to these kind of developing countries. Like, have you ever lived on a farm where, your sister was murdered and raped, and then you're like, fuck, I gotta go ahead and find out how to, grow my, cotton or my rice, or probably not rice. I don't know what the fuck they're growing, but you get the idea, right? That's always bothered me. Like, what are we doing today to really say, okay, and you can't do that unless you live there and you're part of the community and you help out that community, right? If you live in sub-Saharan Africa for 20 years and you say that you've helped, great. But if you're going to go ahead and try to dictate policy through social media, you're not that cool. Nobody fucking cares. At least I don't.
Yeah, nor should you. Nor should anyone. This goes back to back to what we were talking about earlier. If I was in control of things, there would be no voting. Everyone is banned from voting because these people are just hysterical with the things they're just in constant fear about, that they're just projecting onto society and demanding that laws cater to these irrational fears that they have, and they just live in their head, and it makes them hysterical and so emotionally compromised that they should not be in any position of power to be dictating terms for anyone to live by. Not me, not you, not a group of people in sub-Saharan Africa.
That's interesting. So the ideal what if we just brought it to a smaller level then? So you had your 50 states and you're able to vote for your governor and your county, sheriff and all that other bullshit. Are you okay with that?
I'm not okay with it, but I would take it over what we have now. Decentralization is key. Eliminating that bureaucracy as much as possible. The problem I have, even with the Constitution, as we've seen, it didn't work at limiting the government, so there's no reason to think it will in the future. How do we keep the government from growing and expanding into the mess it is today, where innocent people are put in prison or murdered by cops, or people with cancer can't get experimental treatment? Any number of injustices that are happening as a result of the government. The biggest one is the military and what they're doing, and droning people and droning American citizens and innocent women and children, and starting wars for oil. And it's It's too much. How do we keep it from growing and expanding? I don't think we can. Which is why I've
it's
gone
kind of
ANCAP this year, because seeing people advocate, people being locked in their homes, can't open their business, still thinking the government should be in a position to demand these things, and then thinking it's going to be there to help you when you need it after they've caused these issues is laughably ridiculous.
So, as the layman, what does ANCAP stand for?
Anarcho-capitalist. So it's like
Got
it's a
it.
form of anarchism the system of it is capitalism, which gets a bad rap because people don't understand it, but it's basically just the free exchange of goods and services,
The ultimate free market.
the ultimate free market. That's it.
So, so it could be. I mean, it could be bartering. It could actually be. It could go from bartering all the way to cryptocurrency or a mix of both, right? I mean, ultimately, in today's world, it would probably be like you said, right? Instead of fiat, you would have it. You would have your currency backed by like a crypto, which makes the most sense, unless you're in like some sort of dystopian, future, and you're trading bullets or something like that, right? Instead of actually utilizing currency. But I don't really see us going that way. I think, and not to get too deviated, but I would rather. I always think about this, not all the time, but maybe a couple times a month. Is in the world that we live in today, if I were to choose between a dirty nuke in maybe a city or two, or a world war, I would probably take the dirty nuke every time. Every time. Hopefully it's not Salt Lake. Hopefully it's not Phoenix, right?
What
But
expand on that?
if I
What even brought this scenario where you have to choose that up?
Well, I was. The reason I was thinking about this wasn't about regulation or what we were talking about, but really just kind of looking towards the future, right? If you were to give me the keys and say, Andrew, what do you want the future to look like? I would hope if I were to have, the hard choices between those two, I would choose the first. I would really choose terrorist type acts over a world war any day. I think. Horrifying as that sounds.
I suppose it depends on the scope of the world war. Like, would nukes be involved in that anyway? I don't know.
I think so, yeah. I think it'd be, and those are like real tactical nukes, right? A dirty nuke is just literally the tip of a nuclear warhead. It kills like 4,000 people immediately, but then it irradiates an area which would create like, a million people can't live where they used to live. For example, if it detonated in Brooklyn, right? And they wouldn't be able to live there for 50 years rather than a world war.
Yeah, that would
or civil war.
That would fuck a lot of shit up good. That I don't know if I could. I mean, that's like that question where if you're on a train and it's on the tracks and it's going, there's 5 people on the tracks in front of you, and then but you can make it turn onto the tracks to the left, and so if you stay on the tracks you're on, you'll run over and kill 5 people who are tied to the tracks, but you can't stop the train. If you take the train to the left, you're gonna run over one person. You didn't start the train,
Yes.
so would you make the train go to the left and kill one person, or would you do nothing because you don't want to be responsible for killing a person and you don't feel like you're gonna be responsible if you do nothing? It's whoever started this train and put them on the tracks that's actually going to be responsible for killing them, not you.
Yeah, well, it kind of comes back to your anarcho-capitalism, your ANCAP kind of philosophy, which is, a lot of business is all about risk, right? I mean, since the beginning of time, it's all about risk. So being able to say, do you think a business in kind of that 50 states ANCAP kind of society, at least in the United States, would they be more successful if they were to deploy across state lines? I guess it depends on the states, right? I think ultimately that's what it really depends on. You might have some states which are kind of dickheads and they might regulate, and then you have others that don't, quite frankly.
And this goes back to decentralization, and the more options you have, the better chance you have of getting it right by just allowing more choices. Like, they're going to be different ideas are going to get tried, and we'll see exactly what works and what doesn't. I mean, we're seeing right now California and New York don't fucking work. That whole ideology is a cancer. and it's coming over and it's infecting other states. And I saw this video where this guy was talking about someone asked why people hate Californians so much, and he's like, I'm from Montana. Let me explain this to you. Republicans in Montana love the land because they love to go hunting. Democrats in Montana love the land because they think it's beautiful. California liberals come along and they come over and they just want to build condos and live there and destroy the land. So this is why everyone hates Californians, because you're bringing this whole whatever ideology in and just ruining ecosystems of political power.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, because especially when you have, especially the beauty of Montana, right? Or, insert whatever state into that, right? I think there's a very human reaction to say, fuck you to somebody that wants to destroy something that was naturally beautiful before, no matter where you are. So that ideology I totally get. Gosh, when we kind of talk about handing over the keys and changing the government, I think I'm kind of the pragmatist. I very much am. So whatever is going to generate the most GDP, whatever going to generate the most human happiness, is really what I'm going for.
It's going to be freedom every time.
Oh yeah, well I agree with that. And I don't know, there's these certain situations that specific governments do better. And that's why I brought up that question in the beginning, right? Dictatorship, communist state, or, our republic that we have now. And even not just our republic, but also the UK, Germany, a lot of Spain, right? They suck. We suck at pandemics. That's just the way it is. And I think that's okay, because, we have a pandemic of ideas, or an endemic or epidemic of ideas. That's how our country's always been ran. That's how democracy and a republic should be ran. And then I always think to myself, is it right though? Should we change? I don't know.
Well, the other issue with regards to the pandemic, at least in this country, is Trump derangement syndrome, which is a very real thing I've discovered. That no matter how much we joke around about it, it is very real. Like I said, I was following COVID from the early days when there was still less than 1,000 cases in China, and when people started to get concerned with it here, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they were saying it's racist to be concerned about it. Don't change the way you live. We can't limit flights from China. We can't limit people coming from China. Where Trump was trying to do that. So they were encouraging people to go out and continue living their lives. Early on, they were telling people, hey, don't wear masks. Oh, just kidding. You need to wear masks. Oh, don't wear masks. No, you got to wear masks. Oh, let's lock down businesses. Let's force people to stay in their homes, can't go to their businesses, not give them any money for this, any relief or whatsoever. And people have just had enough of it. Like what we're seeing with regards to the pandemic and how it's affecting people, the actions we've taken have been far worse than the pandemic itself. The pandemic has been horrible for obese people, people with underlying medical conditions, and the elderly. And I think we could take steps to protect them. But there was an effort to destabilize this country on election year to make it harder for Trump. I am 100% convinced of that. And, I mean, we're already seeing mayors and governors walking back lockdowns that they've been advocating all through last year. And there's no reason to think that, oh, yeah, now all of a sudden everything's changed, other than the fact that Joe Biden is in office and they want things to go back to as normal as possible. But I still think they're going to want to do mandatory vaccinations. They're going to want to do mandatory masks. They're still going to talk about lockdowns. I just don't think, and I think they realize this, they can get away with it. They know. I don't think civil war is coming, but certainly state seceding is coming. And if they overplay their hand, which I think they're going to, there's going to be no stopping what's coming, and that's going to be.
What do you think about? Yeah, what do you think about companies, corporations censoring the president?
I mean, I've heard that it's a private business and it can do what it wants argument from the fucking liberals, but they're not. the problem with that is they're not saying like, oh, this business can stay open. They can choose to serve people without masks. They can discriminate on any other reason. Businesses can't do whatever they want. Talking about Section 230 and the are you a publisher or a platform thing is my understanding that they can't go in and start censoring people and censoring people and banning people without de facto becoming a publisher, in which case they should be held responsible for the content that's on their platform. I don't think we need to repeal Section 230. It seems we just need to enforce it. I could be wrong on that. I'm not an expert, but that's what the things I've seen people talk about with it. So in a perfect world, a business should be able to do whatever they want, but we're not in that world. Businesses don't get to do whatever they want, certainly not Twitter. And there's no doubt in my mind that they are working directly with intelligence agencies and people with Congress members and people in the government. The things have been too coordinated. Certainly going back to Alex Jones being banned, how one platform right after another just went for it all at the same time, and that was highly suspicious. And I think if we're going to really advocate that a business gets to do what they want, then we're going to advocate for that. If we're not going to advocate that, then no, the president should not be censored off Twitter. People shouldn't be banned. And certainly when the corporate press has a power structure and these big tech companies are working together, they're painting anyone as Nazis, racist, sexist, extremists, right-wing extremists, supporting coups and shit like that. Like, this is really dangerous with regards to restricting the flow of information, which I'm thoroughly against, especially weaponizing the gatekeepers of information to go after people who they deem a threat. Remember when CNN threatened to dox that kid who made the meme of Trump slamming the CNN head down during a wrestling thing? It's shit like that. No, that's not the world we're living in.
What was the Indian guy, the Native American guy that was at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and then that kid
it was
came
at
up.
the March for Life rally, I believe, and Nicholas Sandmann. The media jumped on that when it was completely taken out of context, and no one decided to fact check before all those videos started coming out showing exactly what happened. That guy came over and just inserted himself into a situation and then lied about it. And the media didn't go after the Hebrew Israelites who were saying homophobic and racist things to the black kid in the school group. We saw people advocating violence against a 16-year-old kid, and it's truly horrific to see. I mean, that should have been a red pill moment for most people, but there's still people who will not acknowledge that's what really happened.
Yeah. Well, I think the big turning point for me with CNN and a lot of news agencies, really CNN was the one that broke this first. But Gabby Giffords, right, when she got shot, when she was a representative, right, in I think it was Tucson, and she was outside of like a Safeway, and she got shot in the face, right. And CNN had actually said Gabby Giffords was dead, which, you get shot in the face, not many people survive, but she ended up living. But the fact that they reported that she was dead without confirming it for the sake of being first, that kind of just was like, okay, guys, like, do I really believe you guys now? Like, you would rather just report that she's dead rather than confirming it? Just so you can get first and you can get whatever that might be, right? And you can really twist a story, and well, you can really make a story because of that. I mean, I always like to go back in time, right? Because if you really do any type of story or person during our lifetime, people get really heated, right? But if I talk about somebody 100 years ago, or an event 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, right? People are like, who gives a fuck, right? And the one that I think about is the sinking, I can't remember exactly, but it was the sinking of a ship in the Cuban harbor, which sparked the Spanish-American War. And I believe it was the New York Times that effectively started that war because they said, the Cubans, the Spanish, right, had sunk that ship when it was actually us that planted our own charges on the ship, blew it up. And then, of course, we took over the Philippines from the Spanish and parts of Cuba as well. But the thing is like you had an intelligence agency, whatever it might have been at that point before the Spanish-American War, pretty much working with a major newspaper at the time. And, then we owned the Philippines for a while, right? And I can definitely see your kind of like suspicion of these companies because, well, it happened 100 years ago. What makes it say it's not going to happen again? Because you can spin a story that way and you can stir up the public to say, oh, yeah, fuck the Spanish, right? We should go to war. Yeah, that was totally justified. When, it wasn't at all.
Well, just look at the Twitter censoring the New York Post when they tried to report on the Hunter Biden laptop thing. And the corruption.
Yeah.
And now the mainstream media is starting to report on some of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's shit that was going on, but it's well after the election, a little late for that. I mean, it seems like they're I don't know how they're going to get Biden out of office and Kamala into there, but I think they're keeping their options open. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for me not to connect how destabilized the world seems right now with the fact that I think some of the biggest political revolutions we've seen in recent history was 2016 with Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, which were just two giant middle fingers to the establishment and the people controlling things. And people are starting to wake up. They're not buying the media anymore, and they are panicking, and they are full on panicking, just trying to keep you afraid and listening to them and letting them keep control of the narrative and the flow of information to keep you scared and not questioning and compliant and obedient and not having a say ultimately in how you live your life. And I think that's how they get there. They're going to really start to escalate it as much as possible. I think they're going to fail because too many people are waking up, and that's why I am so optimistic about the future, is because people are realizing that if you watch the media, they're creating a very carefully constructed reality that is designed to keep people trapped, whether it's in limiting their own beliefs or experiences to what they can see in that narrative that they're constructing, and there's just so much more to that. Turn the TV off and go outside, and people are fine. People are getting along. People are living their lives, and there's really nothing to fear at this point.
Yeah. No,
that's certainly warranted anything that's happened over the last year, and again, I think everything happening right now is a result of the fact that they are worried about losing their grip on us and losing control over us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not too sure on the whole world order, at least not yet. You got to convince me a couple episodes, right? But I am definitely convinced with capitalism when it comes to news agencies. We will generate need, and you will listen to us for a certain amount of time. And every 20, 30 years, if there's some sort of agenda that we need to go ahead and take care of, we'll take care of it for you because we agree with that agenda, right? Again, that example of the Spanish-American War, or you can use an example today. To kind of I guess we have 10, 15 minutes left. I really wanted to kind of talk about aliens.
Right.
Mostly because I listened to the Travis Walton. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet. I listened to the first 45 minutes to an hour of the Joe Rogan podcast and how this guy talked about his experience. And then, of course, Joe Rogan talking about Commander Fravor with the Tic Tac type object. I really just want to know what you think about that. And do you think we're going to finally see something this next decade?
I think it'll be sometime this decade, but probably really soon. I think they've been building us up for that. All these disclosures that have been going on for the past, I think it's been a couple of years. But it seems like there's been a very... I don't know what the agenda is, if it's real or if they're trying to paint them as hostile, but it's been the way that they've been trying to roll this out has been kind of suspicious. There's a group that has been talking about that has been trying to get disclosure, and they're made up of a bunch of like former military guys, and then Tom DeLonge, who was the singer. I don't remember the name of the band he's in. I don't really like them, but it's really just bizarre the way they're going about it. When my own experiences, right? We talked about this on the last podcast. They are kind of spiritual beings. They've transcended this dimension into just pure spiritual beings. I have no doubt that there are. It sounds like I watched the movie of Travis Walton, right? And it seemed like those aliens were pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Is that the impression you got?
Well, I don't think. Yeah, they're. I don't know. I don't know if they're nasty. I just. Yeah. How do you think? I mean, if you're like a Type 2 Kardashev scale civilization, right? You can harness the power of your solar system, right? Which I believe that's the type of, like, if you can harness that much energy of your local star, what are you thinking about? What? I don't know. They're not that malicious. I just think they're a little malicious. But this kind of goes back to my the idea of government, right? And which government is best. Because, in order to get to that point, a civilization, an entire group of people need to think, okay, we need to go ahead and build a stellar drive in order to move our star with a giant object that will be able to move our star just in case there's asteroids that come into our system. Or we want to move our star to move closer to another star. Or we want to create gigantic projects to populate other star systems, right? I think that requires a lot more group effort. And, I mean, you kind of transcend into some sort of spiritual realm, but in order to get to that point, I just don't know what form of government you need.
There would be none. I don't think you could have one.
Well, it would all be technology enabled. So it kind of goes back to the other thing. If I were to get the keys today, I would say, and we only made minimal changes, right? The biggest minimal changes, just two: term limits and a true republic, which means I get an app on my phone. I know exactly who my representative, my senator, and the president is, and maybe, care about the governor. But everybody votes on their phone or on their desktop. Like, hey, this is the issue. We've taken videos of this issue. What do you guys think? I have no bias. I will vote along the lines that you guys vote in your phone. Obviously, there's a lot of security risk in that, but I would much rather have that today than just have some random representative that, quite frankly, I don't give a shit about.
I mean, you might be able to do that with blockchain and shit to ensure it's secure. So it's almost like a democratic republic, I guess, where your congressperson is going to vote how the people democratically want him to. It sounds like.
That's right.
I still think leaves too much people in power, and there's still the whole issue of people behind the scenes who are secretly running things. Term limits, I'm right there with you. I just don't know how much it can actually change things, because it's the same people who are in these, like the military-industrial complex, the corporate interests. Like, these are the same people who are really running the country, and certainly
the dynasties.
The dynasties, and I think that those are the real issues. We'd have to eliminate the power that they can exploit. Otherwise, nothing can change. And there might be, as far as back to aliens, there might be room for them to have government, but it can't be based on ruling. Right, it's got to be based on cooperation. If you can transcend this reality, this dimension into some kind of next dimension where people are capable of working together in that way, where they've kind of transcended greed and I think greed would be the biggest one. I think it would be possible to create a government that's based on cooperation and enhancement and advancement. rather than one that's based on ruling and enriching certain power structures.
Yeah, because that's the thing that always gets me is if we really want to make the next step, I mean, technology is definitely going to help us get there. Telepathy, I think, will be the biggest, right? And you see that across all these kind of abduction stories. They don't talk, right? The aliens don't talk. They don't mimic to each other. It's all telepathy. At least that's what it seems, right? Unless you watched Arrival, then that was some weird ass ink splotches, right?
I missed that one. Shit.
Yeah, you still got to watch it. So good. I've only watched it once, but still good. But, aside from that, it's always like some sort of telepathic being. And, I almost like a genetic engineering of beings as well. Like if we're going to take these specific group of people on a long journey, we need to genetically engineer them to look like little gray men. If we're going to go ahead and have a bunch of miners or whatever, we're going to genetically engineer them and then enhance them with cybernetics to be miners for the next 200 years. Something like that. That's how I would envision it. So when we talk about these little gray men, I think they are genetically engineered, either humans from another dimension or genetically engineered beings from some other, I don't know if it'd be dimension, could be our own dimension, but they're definitely genetically engineered. I bet all of my ducats that the other part of the race look different.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I mean the like you think about alien abductions and the way the Hollywood has portrayed alien abductions. To me, and it's been a long time since I saw the Travis Walton movie, but they seem malicious, right? They were there attacking people or studying them and torturing them. I may be wrong on that, but I mean, there's obviously been movies where that's the case, and that's been probably the most prevalent, right? Hollywood hasn't portrayed aliens as peaceful, loving, spiritual beings. So, my own experience, right? I haven't seen, like I told you, I was meditating. I went and I saw that the blue elf. And that's one of those things, right? Like a lot of people who start meditating, they have these experiences where they're not on any substances, and they go and they see and have these conversations with these blue elves. People on psychedelics, they will have conversations with they call them mechanical elves, and they look a little more kind of mechanical, I guess, and
like steampunk almost.
But it's interesting. I don't know what that means. But it's interesting that so many people can have such similar experiences, both on substances and off substances. And I think there's definitely something more to it that we just haven't fully been able to grasp yet. And I think we're on the verge of that, and I think it's coming. But I think some things have to fall away. The power structure on Earth has to fall away before people. I mean, at this point, like they could announce that tomorrow that aliens exist, the government or whoever, and people would be like, "Oh wow, 2021, not surprising." But I saw this documentary about the government was going to stage an alien invasion, and when the aliens tried to come in and help us, the aliens are trying to help us. And the government was going to stage them, make them seem hostile, and stage an invasion, and to bring about the one world government. So I'm kind of on the lookout for that because it was a really compelling documentary. I don't remember what it was called. Unacknowledged, maybe. Stephen Greer is the name of the guy who was involved in that.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Last I checked, it was on Netflix, but
okay.
So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, for our next podcast, I really want to talk about dreams. Just to kind of wrap this one up, I had a dream, another one of my kind of odd dreams, but they've become a lot more normal than they used to be when I was younger. This one was particularly interesting because, again, it always follows the same trend of like, okay, I know something or someone is here. I can feel it in my dream. And what it was a little bit more abstract. I was like in a graveyard, and I remember like starting to get a little bit more like the gravity wasn't as working so much, and I was starting to kind of float a little bit more. And I remember turning around, and I saw a kid on a bicycle, like staring at me, and he was in the air in the bicycle, almost like Toto and Dorothy from the movie from the 30s, right?
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, and I was like, and because I'm more cognizant of my dreams now, I was like, you are not part of my dream. You are outside of my dream. So, and I acknowledged it. I was like, you. And then it ended. So, and then I tried to go back into my dream after I fell asleep, but, I woke up and then fell back asleep, and usually I can go right back into my dreams, but when I went back into the dream, he wasn't there anymore, so that was weird.
Interesting.
So next time.
Yeah, definitely. So are we good with this one?
Podcast number 2, dude.
Podcast number 2. After we get off here, I'm gonna call you.
All right, cool.
All right, later.
Peace.